Hello, welcome to AATV Live. This is our first episode of us trying to live stream, so things may go wrong. I'm currently surrounded by 3 dogs. I'm sure one of which will make an appearance at some point. So this, in our first episode, we're going to talk about UK service rifles. Bear in mind, obviously we're in the middle of the COVID coronavirus lockdown, so this is my house. Probably have some interruptions from people in the house and noises, but let's just crack on with that. For our first episode, I've got a really special guest. He'd probably claim he's not, but I think he's fantastic. We've got Ben Skinner from the English Kiwi YouTube channel. How you doing, Ben?
I'm good, and I just got the Instagram post out that very second. So, oh wow, this is weird. I'm seeing like 3 of you because I've got the stream up as well, so I can see the comments. I'm good. Not special, but good.
Good. So you're working from home?
Yep.
Ish.
Yeah. Had a sore throat, so I took the week off.
Okay, right, okay. Yeah,
I may well be infected.
Right, I can't. That's all right. I can't. I think we should be all right down the wires. Yeah, it should be absolutely fine.
Hang on, I just cough onto the network card.
Yeah, I'll try and. I'm going to end up looking at my screen because I'm running a stream.
Yep.
And we'll see what happens. Wow. Okay, we've got some people already. Hi, Mark. How you doing? Hi, Rob. Good to see you. And Rob Davis. That's awesome. Right, so what we're going to talk about today is mainly because it's kind of quite long, and some guy called English Kiwi commenting as well. So that's quite
oh no, who's that?
I don't know who that dude is. That's really quite strange.
No.
Look, there he is. Right,
so can't capitalise properly.
So what we're going to talk about today is the history of UK service rifles. Now, we could go way back into like the Lee Metfords and the even older stuff, but what we're going to start with is basically 1945 onwards.
Yep.
Potentially, mainly because I've got a DIAC number 4 Mark 1 next to me. The rest of the riffs Ben's got behind him. You'll probably see something behind him over his head at the moment. So that's all good. Right, so how to start this? Well, let's just go for it. So here is, so in 1945, this was, I've just switched to my main camera so everyone can see this rifle. So this is a Canadian made, so long branch, number 4 Mark 1 Star Lee Enfield rifle. Bolt action. So for those of you, I'm sure most of you know, but for those of you who don't, you have to manually cycle the weapon. Every time you pull the trigger, you have to run the bolt to put another round into the chamber. Okay, so it's not really what we're used to these days with bang, 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 bang every time you pull the trigger. It's shot from a 10-round detachable magazine, although in reality they only got 1 magazine, so it fed from stripper clips instead. And this was only really there for cleaning and servicing and everything else. Anything you want to say at this point, Ben?
Well, I'll say I consider the Lee Enfield to be the pinnacle of bolt-action service rifles. It was, if you were firing it, aim shots, it was the fastest cycling service rifle you could get, purely because the design of it meant you didn't have to take your face off of your cheek weld every time you cocked the rifle, unlike most other service rifles.
So I'll just demonstrate that. I'll just take this magazine off. This is a DIAC, so it's got a blocked chamber, so I can't actually feed the rounds. So what Ben is saying is a lot of service rifles had a quite long bolt throw. So when you came up and you were aiming at your target and you'd fired and you ran the bolt, you'd have to move your head out of the way in order to run the bolt, put it back in again and reacquire your sight picture. So on a Lee Enfield, you can just about leave your head in place, and it's got quite a short throw, and you can run the bolt really fast. Okay, so this was the end of a long generation of rifles. I mean, the Lee, So the Lee action, I can't off the top of my head, I can't remember.
So it was the Lee Metford first, and that was like 1880s, 1890s, and then obviously we got the Lee Enfield Mark 1, which saw us through World War One. Again, it's a very similar rifle, apart from couple of the key noticeable things was the early ones had a magazine cut-off, so you could still do, which was their kind of doctrine at the time, was cut the magazine off, feed it in round by round, much like you would with the Martini Henry, although slightly different mechanism there. And then they kind of got rid of that because it's unnecessary, and it was just an extra machining step. And the other big noticeable thing was it was leaf sights, much like the Mauser style. So the rear sight was an open notch, much like a AK open notch style, and it sat up in front of the loading block, the breech.
Yeah. So it was over here.
Sorry, Alexa just started talking to me. No, shush.
Yeah, so it had a tangent leaf sight here, didn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And then on the number 4, they moved to. So this has an open battle sight notch, which is this, just not a notch, aperture sight. And then that's, I think their 0 is about 300 meters, and then for longer range shooting or more precise shooting, it has this micrometer sight here.
Yep.
This one's actually a bit jammed, so it won't go up and down. But this, you basically dial in the range that you want. Oh, actually it does really look. It's actually managed to fix itself. So for further range, you dial it in, and you can see there's a little aperture here, and that goes up and down. Okay. Generally, they use this 300 round battle sight and just didn't worry about it. And there were some war expediency ones where they just didn't. This takes quite a lot of machining, quite a lot of work. This little sight. So some later stuff in World War II where they basically just I think they just had a 2-position flip, didn't they, for long and short. Yeah, something really simple. Okay, so this, the Enfield, and it served on in British service for a long time. It was 50 years. This was one form or another. There were some various changes to the action, but fundamentally, the same family of rifles was in service for 50 years, which was an awful long time. I'll just put a bit of footage up of one shooting, just so people, and we can kind of talk over the top. So I'll just switch to some YouTube. This is these guys, 9-hole reviews, fantastic YouTube channel. If you get the chance, they do practical accuracy and shooting of loads of different rifles. Let me just turn this volume down a little bit. So here's one in action. So if you get a chance to subscribe to these guys, 9-hole reviews on YouTube, I think it's a really great channel, really high production standards, and they show some really interesting stuff. So we'll just whiz through this, get you some shots.
So have you ever had a chance to shoot a Lee live?
I've not ever shot one, no. So I'm super jealous. I've got some Ray Moxon in the comments. Says he shot one as a cadet, so I'm super jealous of that, Ray.
So I used to shoot what they called the number 8, which was the 2-2 conversion for Lees for cadets. And I mean, without much practice, I used to be able to get 10 rounds manual loading single shot in under 20 seconds aimed. But it's because that action's so fast, and once you know where to pick your rounds up from, you don't have to come off that cheek hold at all. It is quite quick.
Do you need to operate it with a bit of kind of a bit of violence, or is it do you need to kind of run that action, or is it just?
Well, okay, so the ones we had were pretty shagged out. So I mean, I was just bashing it forward and back as fast as possible. But if you actually look after your leads and clean them and service them, they can be quite smooth. Yeah. So I'm sure my mate will watch this at some point. He actually has he's part of the Lee Enfield Rifle, was it LERA, the Enfield Rifle Association. Yeah. So he owns a couple of Lees and shoots them quite regularly at Bisley and stuff, and does the UK competitions with them. Weirdly, he says he likes his number 1 Mark III more than the number 4.
So that's the SMLE, what we'd consider an SMLE. Yeah.
Yeah, he likes the Smelly more than he likes the number 4. I know he just prefers the blade sight to ring. But yeah, I don't know. I always like the ring.
Hang on, I can't hear you suddenly.
Oh, hang on. Oh, did my mic die? No, she's the one.
Could be that there's some weird stuff going on with my broadcast software.
Possibly. Is anyone else having issues? What seems left into it? Ah, that's a good question by Rob Davis, actually, if you can hear me.
Just check Skype.
Checking OBS. Okay, my mic's still loud on OBS. Check Skype. Am I muted somehow in Skype?
Guys, in the comments, can you still hear Ben? Because I can't. So I know there'll be a bit of a delay on that.
Yeah.
While I'm waiting, Rob and James have asked whether they've used as a marksman rifle with an optic. Yes, they were. Yeah, okay, I can't hear Ben for some strange reason. Cheers,
Am I
guys.
back
Thanks
now
for
yet?
letting us know.
Okay, all right.
Thanks,
weird.
Jay.
Hang on, give me a second.
So, for some reason that I can't hear Ben. It's probably something to do with my headset. Let me just check. So give us 2 minutes, chaps, and we'll sort something out.
If I do that.
I'm just going to disconnect my Bluetooth headset and reconnect it.
So I guess everyone in the stream can still hear me. What I have up on my screen at the moment is, in fact, one of the. I believe this was a police sniper variant of the Lee Enfield, chambered in 7.62 that my mate was able to shoot when he was at Bisley. So yes, there was optic versions of the Lee Enfield used as marksman rifles, and I believe the British Army actually used them up until we adopted the L96.
Yep, I can hear you again, Ben.
Ah, excellent.
Brilliant. So I think something to do with my Bluetooth headset. So what I'll probably be careful of the YouTube videos because it seems to interrupt with the seems to take over the audio. But I do have right here. Here we go. So this is an L42A1. So this is what we're talking about as the marksman rifle. So this was the British Army, as Ben says. This was the British Army sniper rifle right up until the introduction of the L96 in the 90s. So this carried on for a very long time. These were in Gulf War One, still in service. These are still super popular rifles in the kind of civilian community. A lot of them ended up in the bottom of the North Sea, like a lot of ex-British Army weapons.
Yeah, that's not the best, is it?
It's really upset quite a lot of people.
I'll tell you what's quite funny. So that video I had up was I got invited to like a friends and family shooting day with Lyra, with my mate, and I said, I'd really like to shoot an optic Lee. One of the other club members had one. I shot it. My other mate shot it. My mate, who's part of Lyra, shot it. And then his dad shot it, and then went, we need to get one of these. I went and bought one that day because they liked it so much, and they are really, really nice rifles. Obviously, much more with the kind of trends for more accuracy with modern rifles. Obviously, they're not free-floated barrels, so that's kind of why they started moving away towards.
I think they were those L42s. I think they were.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think they were free. Yeah, so the handguard was. I think you could run a bit of paper all the way down to the barrel on those.
All right, fair enough.
But they're in 7.62 NATO, so they had been rechambered to 303. So we'll just finish off this, and we'll move on to the next one, which is going to get complicated, mainly because we don't have one. So this is 303 British for you guys. So it's a rimmed cartridge. You can see the big rim sticking out here. So that's a very old design. Quite a lot of taper on the cartridge as well, which made it easier for manufacturing processes of the day. Bear in mind this was introduced in the 1880s odd. Someone will probably have a more accurate date in the comments, but this is a very old round.
Let's have a quick Google. So I have the fired empty case here of one. And I guess we're going to be moving on to the 308.
Well, we're going to do the EM2 next.
In 280? Ooh.
In 280 British.
Oh, you are spoiling me today.
Which is, I know. And we're going to go into the whole 280 British ammo scandal with the US as well. Normally I wouldn't do this on a video on the channel, but I think today, since everyone's probably really, really bored, we can really, really bore everyone as well. So let's move on to the rifle most people don't know about. And if you actually look at the graphic I put up as the thumbnail, it's from a great guy called Graphica Mechanica, who does loads of different kind of historical rifle and weapon pictures. You can buy his stuff on Redbubble. Even he didn't put it in, even though it was actually a British service weapon for all of, I don't know, a week.
4 months?
3-4 months. Was it that long? Okay, yeah, so the EM2. I'll throw a picture of the EM2 up if I can find one. Which I did pull one off the interwebs just for this. Okay, here we go. So on the right hand side of this screen at the moment, you can see the EM2 rifle. So I think it just means experimental 2.
Yeah, it was experimental model 2 because there was the EM1 Thorpe and this was the EM2 Janssen. Yeah, it was I believe it was Czech, and he kind of naturalised his name to Janssen. I'm not even going to begin to try and produce the his actual name because I'll just murder it. So let me just. Okay. So I've just seen it. So you've got the EM2 on the right. You've got the XM60, and then you've got an L85A2.
Yep.
Kind of later spec on the left there.
Yep.
Excellent. Right. Yeah. So EM2 was basically a rip-off of the German FG42 ballparks.
No, that was the EM1. So the EM2 is the flapper lock, so it's the Gewehr 43.
Yes, that's it. Right, I know both of them, but
I know. I was just watching Forgotten Weapons. If you want more details on this stuff, guys, Forgotten Weapons on YouTube, absolutely the place to go for that kind of stuff. It's much more revealing. Here you go. So Ben will play that one, Ben. That would be great.
Which one?
The shooting the M2 and 280 British.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one.
Also, coincidentally, he's basically the only person on YouTube who's made any footage with the EM2s.
So the EM2, yeah, very, very, very long forgotten gun. Quite remarkable, really, because we're looking at the late 40s, and the British were looking at bringing in a bullpup rifle.
And issuing an optic with every soldier, which is something they didn't actually do until, 85, when they introduced the L85. And I think basically they were the first, we were the first kind of nation to actually adopt optics on every service person's rifle. Yeah, well, this
thing is super modern, right? Other than the furniture, you could, and a bit of work, this would be bang up to date at the moment. So we're looking at a bullpup rifle, 20 inch barrel. The British had recognised that a full power rifle cartridge, like 303, like 8mm Mauser, like 30-06, was just too much on the battlefield.
Yep.
Those things are designed for shooting over 600 metres, and they've done a lot of studies and realised that combat in World War II just wasn't at that distance.
And I mean, they weren't the first to realise it. If you look at Germany late war, what were they issuing? They were making Sturgenwehr 40.
Yep.
45?
STG 44s or whatever you want to call it. With 8mm Kurtz, which is a tiny little, not tiny little round, but it was a cut down 8mm Mauser.
Yeah. And even America did it with the M1 carbine. That was effectively an intermediate cartridge at that point.
Yep.
Although America won't admit to that.
So the British had decided that, let's look at other numbers. Let's look at the engagements. It's just not happening at 600, 800, 1,000 metres. Most engagements are within 300 metres, and of most of those, 80% are within 100 metres. You just don't need a big cartridge to do it. You can just see some very rare 280 British just spinning off them. So they chambered this thing in a cartridge called 280 British, so 0.28 of an inch. It was It's bigger than what we'd consider now as 5.56. So again, I'll just get a 5.56 round. A 5.56 is what we're currently shooting, and most armies are currently shooting. So this is 5.56. Compare that to 303. Okay, 5.56 is a lot smaller than 303, and 280 British is pretty much somewhere in the middle.
Yep.
Okay. And they figured that was enough cartridge and enough power and enough of a bullet to quite happily shoot within 300 meters. And if you have to stretch the legs a bit further out, you can do it. So what happened to the EM2, Ben? Because basically it was officially adopted as the number 9, I believe.
Yeah, number 9 rifle for all of 3 months. And basically, America happened. Or in particular, one very stubborn general in America, really. And that kind of spiraled and sent us down the path of adopting the SLR. And sent America down the path of adopting the M14.
Right. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that trial. So there was a trial in 1950, 1951 in the US, and we sent the EM2 and 280 British. The Belgians, stroke the Europeans, sent the FN-FAU also in 280 British.
Yep.
We convinced the Europeans that actually this was a good idea. The Americans had what turned into the M14 in what turned into 7.62 NATO.
Yeah.
And they had another entry, though the guy who'd entered his rifle didn't actually know it was a full-on military trial and just thought it was a demonstration day. And he was planning on going home that day on the train. Didn't know it was going to be like a week-long test. The purpose of the trial was to select a new service weapon and a new service cartridge for the entirety of NATO. Obviously, they've just come out of World War II. And in World War II, logistics were a nightmare. You had French, US, American, God knows what else in the field, all of which you were using a different main service weapon and all of whom were using a different cartridge. So you can imagine if you could just get it down to one rifle and one cartridge, logistically life would be a lot easier. And if you need supplies, you can get them from next door. Whereas if you've got a bunch of French dudes firing 7.5 French, that's not going in your 303 British.
No.
So everyone thought this would be a super sensible idea. They got together and it all went a bit wrong.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure. Well, for one, 280 British rounds that went over there was some fault with them, and they were like a really crap air-sealed AEG, and they were massively fluctuating through the chronos.
So the powder load had been inconsistent, so they were not very accurate. So we're trying to get them to. Yes, we're trying to get them to adopt a new cartridge, saying it's the best thing ever, and people couldn't hit anything with it because it was so inconsistent. Not a great start.
Yeah, there was that, and also I'm pretty sure the US general who was in charge of the US side of things had considerable shares in the factories that currently made the M1 Garand, and basically he'd been told by the Garand factory people that the M14 design had something like 80% part compatibility with the M1. So effectively they could be like, oh yeah, we can just make this new battle rifle using pretty much all the old tooling and it'll be super cheap and super affordable. And he went, cash money. And anyway, no, that didn't work
Massive
out.
lies.
Yeah, basically. And so he basically went straight in and was like, we're not accepting anything less than 30 or 6.
Yeah. So they wanted so they insisted on a 30 caliber 30 caliber bullet. Yeah. And the bullet they were proposing was 308 Winchester, which then turned into 7.62 NATO. Yeah. Eventually, load of political wranglings, load of stuff went on, and the Brits and Europeans went, okay, we will use your super fantastic 7.62 millimeter NATO cartridge, which is vastly overpowered, as long as you agree to use a common service rifle. And that effectively what was agreed on was the FN-FAU. So if you could grab yours, Ben, and we'll start talking about that story.
So this is the SLR, which is the British version of the FAU. There were some slight differences. For those in the know, you have what is called the inch pattern and the metric pattern. They're pretty much exactly the same. It just refers to Commonwealth built ones and kind of European and other built ones. Most parts So most subparts aren't interchangeable, but most assemblies are. So like you could drop a metric bolt assembly into a Imperial rifle. Mags are compatible one way. So things like the British version used a whole tab at the front, a solid tab, whereas the metric versions used just a welded dot. So they kept falling out compared to these ones, which kind of stayed in. But yes, this was effectively what was going to become the NATO rifle, the FAL, the Fusil Automatic Léger, the personal automatic rifle, I believe, in French. Or the
yeah. So we went home and Churchill.
Yeah, that's basically what happened.
Churchill said, "Right, we're doing this. We're gonna adopt this rifle in this caliber. Let's bin off the hi Dan. Let's bin off the EM2 or the number 9 as it was then, and we're going to adopt this rifle. Only to find, so everyone's quite happy. Everyone's made a compromise. Fine, we're just going to get on with it. And then to find that the Yanks went, no, sod it, we're going to run the M14.
Yeah, and their primary reason for that was because it was such a heavy bastard. It was marginally more accurate to shoot because it had apparently slightly less felt recoil, and then they ended up taking it to Vietnam, and most of the squaddies flicked that little magic switch on it, and then how did that go for them?
So if you want to know more about the M14, we cover that in our US service weapon video, which is up on AATV YouTube channel. So we won't labour about it too much, but effectively got screwed over by the Yanks. Not great, but there we were. And there we are. So, which then meant that we ended up adopting again the FAL in 7.62 NATO.
Yep.
The Americans very quickly actually changed to 5.56, which really didn't help. But there you go. So let's talk a bit more about the FAL, aka God's own bang stick, aka the rifle, aka
a stupidly long rifle.
If you could talk to some old squaddies and half of the internet world, apparently it's the best gun ever invented ever in the history of the entire world.
Well, it kind of is. I love it.
Okay, do you want to talk about it a little bit then, Ben? Just go from tip to butt, as Garan Thumb likes to do. I'll make you big on screen.
Oh,
so it's all yours, mate.
Right. So pretty much like this, minus this kind of little sticky up bit here, is how it was originally delivered to the British Army. So it was lovely wood furniture, and the pistol grip would have been wood, but lo and behold, motors have to go in things. We have lovely kind of M14-ish flash hider there, so long extended birdcage flash hider.
Yeah.
Which can take bayonet. I believe it's the same one that the Sterling used.
Could it take NATO rifle grenades?
That is a good question. I think it could take the inertia rifle grenades. I'm pretty sure these could take rifle grenades, although the setup with the takedown lever, which is this lovely little bit here, meant that occasionally you'd fire a rifle grenade off of it, and then it would pop open and the bolt would come flying up the back, which is why you see on some FALs the takedown lever is, instead of being vertically up, it's actually forwards and along.
Okay, so you don't get the inertia running backwards yet. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
One of the things that was praised by some and hated by others is the very fine adjustment gas port. So you can really tune it in so it cycles well enough to be able to reload the round or load the next round, but not too hard that it just smashes into the rear of the receiver and gives you loads of felt recoil, which is quite a smart idea for trained soldiers and for people who actually spend the time tuning it, but for kind of like militias or giving it to people who, as an emergency rifle, not the best.
Yeah, I guess it was designed for small post World War II professional armies.
Yes,
and designed for guys that could look after their weapons and could maintain them and run them in a professional manner.
Yes, yeah. But unlike the AK, which is just every gas will do fine. And they got things
just
like
massively overgas it and hope for the best.
Yeah, and then obviously quite a nice long handguard. So in terms of mechanism in this is a short stroke gas piston design, and I believe it's a tilting block.
Yes, tilting block. Like it's actually quite with the Sturmgewehr. It's got the same tilting block as the Sturmgewehr, so the Russian the German the assault rifle.
Yeah,
and a short straight gas piston, which was quite out of the Gewehr 43 or the Tokarev or the. At this point, there was so much research done in World War II in Nazi Germany that people were just borrowing. So back to interview camp, people were just borrowing bits and mechanisms and everything else out of all these guns.
This came out of Belgium.
Yeah.
So the people working on this would have probably been, forced to work on Nazi Germany designs. So they've gone, screw it, I'm free now. I will just take this and make my own rifle design, and we get these. Right. So continuing on down the rifle, one of the things the SLR had over standard FALs is sand cuts in the bolt for operating in British territories in dusty conditions, which we had quite a lot of at the time. So gives a bit more clearance, and the idea is it can kind of pull and chuck dust and grit out of the gun as it cycles. I'm not sure whether or not that actually turned out to be a good thing or not. I think Israel tried it and didn't particularly like it, so they switched quite quickly to the Galil. But then again, I think a lot of the soldiers there weren't as well trained, so they weren't adjusting their gas ports properly.
Yeah.
And the Galil was basically a NATOized AK.
Yeah, which also didn't spend that long in service, because actually it ended up going to rear echelon troops, and they started using M16s and various patterns of AR anyway.
And then eventually moving on to the Tavor.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then moving down, the big difference between the SLR and the FAL was it was a self-loading rifle, it wasn't an automatic rifle. So this will only go to safe. Admittedly, this one goes to auto, but the real one only goes to safe and semi. So it's a single shot only, which is a good thing, because then you don't get troops dumping loads of uncontrollable 7.62 all the way down and running through ammo very quickly. See M14 Vietnam. Admittedly, I know the Aussies made something called the Bitch for Vietnam.
Yeah.
Which they modded it so it only fired full auto, shortened the barrel, I think put a Bren flash hider on it.
Yeah, put a Bren mag on it as well with beefed up springs.
Yeah, put the 30 round mag on it.
From the L4, not a Bren mag, but yeah.
Yeah, so the Aussies and the Canadians adopted a squad automatic weapon version of this. So it didn't have a handguard, it just had two big beefy bipods. And basically they took that, cut it down, and put another front grip on it. And the idea was, if they're patrolling through the bush and they get contact, they just dump this 30 round at the general vicinity of where the shots came from. And then they can bug out in the time it takes the other people to go, holy crap, what the hell was that? Because short barrel, big flash hider on it, very, very loud.
Yep.
Very disorientating. It wasn't designed to actually kind of hit anyone. It was just designed as a purely suppressive thing. But yeah, that was an interesting tidbit.
So you've got a flippy outy charging handle there, so that was quite a big difference.
So flipping out, folding charging handle. Made it just, that bit more smooth compared to, I don't know how a standard one, but a standard one's kind of like, in fact, it's pretty much an L85A1 style cocking handle sticking out the side of the FAL.
Yep.
So you can get that caught on stuff, whereas it just folds away, and it's a very smooth and sleek rifle design. And then I think the other big difference is we went for more raised up sights and a drop stock on it, as opposed to kind of fixed short sights and very close to the barrel. I'm not entirely sure what the decision there was, because I'm pretty sure all rifle design is trying to get the sights as close to the barrel as possible. But hey ho.
Might have been something to do with gas masks.
Ah, very true. Yes, that could be a very true thing. So this was kind of like the first iteration of the L1, and in fact, it didn't really change. It was the L1A1 by the time it went out of service. The only real differences they made were and I'll switch to my SLR that isn't an SLR, which is in bits at the moment, is they put nylon polymer style furniture on it.
Yeah.
Which
was largely for decontamination. Yeah.
Yeah. And it made it slightly lighter. But I think the wood looks far better.
Classy. Is that real wood, or is that?
Yeah, this is real furniture that I spent way too much on.
So what riff is that? So let's take us back to airsoft. What actually
back to airsoft.
What actually is this gun?
Right, there are two SLRs that you can get that you could get. There is the Ares version, which is currently available, and then there's this version, which is the King Arms. Now, the King Arms, I think, is just generally a better rifle. It actually pretty much takes down like the real one, unlike the Ares, and it can take real furniture on it with only one slight mod to the stock, which is drill out the cleaning kit compartment so you can run your battery wires through it. Other than that, it's pretty much drop on. Lovely, lovely rifle, and then on top of it, this random little bit here and the other kind of upgrade they did to the SLR, which was I guess the marksman variant. So I don't think it was standard issue, but this is called the Super Sight, which is Sight Unit Infantry Trilux, which is effectively a SUSAT, or the predecessor to the SUSAT. So I think it's 4 times power. Although, this is going to be hard to show. If you look, the incident lens is offset to the barrel because they're worried about heat haze. So slightly different. And I remember finding a document about them somewhere, which I think was the original proposal to the MOD for the site. And effectively it said, oh yeah, we're going to take one of our field binoculars, cut it in half, and then put an AATV post in. And that's effectively what this is. But it's a very rugged sight because the adjustments are all external and you adjust it by moving it round on the mount as opposed to moving something inside. So this one's a real one. You can't get airsoft clones. So again, I spent far too much money on this.
It's very nice though. So Gaz, Rebel UK says King Arms should be bringing one out again this year, so they're starting the production line again. We're also all hoping that LCT make
release
one.
gas version. Yeah, I would love a gas version one of these. So I'd heard rumours that King Arms were releasing again, although the person at the time wouldn't confirm whether or not it was King Arms, but they said it was an electric blowback, and the photos they showed were the exact same photos that are on King Arms' website. So there we go.
It's definitely one I want in the collection. I mean, it's one also. I mean, the amount I actually play a gas one would be brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's such a revered. It's been called the right arm of the free world. The FAO is so successful. It was exported to so many countries and license made in so many countries.
Well, it's still made today.
Yeah. In the States they're still making them. They're probably license produced by some small country somewhere as well, still being made as well.
I think India's still making them. I think Argentina still makes them.
Okay.
Which brings us on to probably the most famous use of the SLR on the FAO was when the SLR went up against the FAO in 1982. Yeah. Which weirdly, that kind of environment that it fought through, being the Falklands, is actually long engagement distances, and 7.62 was actually probably a better choice than 5.56 in that environment. Because it's just long rolling tundra with nothing between it, because there's some houses on it in one place, and that's it. Whereas I wonder how the EM2 would have coped if we had kept the EM2, and how 280 would have faced off against. Well, I guess it'd be 280 versus 280 because Argentina would have just adopted the FAO.
Yeah, so it'd have been the same. Would have been the same anyway. I mean, a lot of the actions were at night. But yeah, okay. So LCT possibly doing a AEG version. VFC have prototyped GBB, which I think will be extremely popular with viewers of this channel.
Yes.
So that's going to be quite a big one. I'd love one. Whether I paint it and get all the baby poo colours out and do a Rhodesian one is another story entirely.
So I before I had this one, I had a King Arms. Was it G1? Yeah, King Arms G1, which was the very shortly adopted German FAO.
That's right. Even the Germans did it, and then they wanted to license produce it, and Henshaw went, "Well, no, not after what you just did." We're talking very shortly after World War II.
Yeah, they adopted the G3 or the SETME, as it.
That's right, because all the Mauser engineers went to SETME in Spain and then came back over and formed Heckler and Koch, or Koch, whoever you want to produce it. We'll probably do that. The history of Heckler and Koch,
Yeah.
in another video because that's quite long.
But-
I'll get someone on with a collection of those replicas to help me with that one. Okay,
Yeah.
so how long was the SLR L1A1 in service for?
Well, it had been almost 40 years. So it was adopted 1950-ish, and it served through to 85, pretty much.
Yeah, there were some with reservists it deployed to the Gulf War as well. So
Yes.
it was in right up into the 90s. The guys in 58 pattern webbing with L1A1s in the Gulf.
Well, they are good rifles, and they have that extra punch that 5.56 didn't have for that kind of longer range engagement.
And still in service. A lot of people would say 7.62 was overpowered. I'm not a ballistics expert, so we'll just have to go with it. Okay, so we're going to put the fowls away and the L1A1s, and we're going to move on to probably the most maligned service weapon in history, the L85. So again, if you want a real potted history, I'll just make you big again, Ben. There we go. Right. If you want a real potted history of the L85 or the SA80 family, Ian McCollum from Forgotten Weapons on YouTube has something like 11-part series on the entire developmental history. We're going to run over it quite quickly because we've got nothing else to do, and airsoft has been banned for the time being. So we're going to talk about the history of the L85. So again,
otherwise known as a civil servant because it never bloody works.
So we had so there's a load of politics involved in this. We're not firearms experts or historians, but we will try and do our best to kind of give you an airsofters overview. So effectively, this project started really quite early on.
It started pretty much when America went sod 7.62. We're adopting 5.56, and so they moved over to the M16 platform, and we started looking at where are we going next. And by that point, basically, the people developing had gone, well, if America are going to stick to the NATO standard of 7.62, why should we? And so they started experimenting with all these different calibers, and they went back to wanting bullpups again, because we never really talked about why they wanted the bullpup.
Okay, well, let's do that now. Let's do that right now, yeah.
Well, let's just say that this rifle has pretty much the same barrel length as the SLR, give or take.
Do you want to put them next to each other so people can see the difference?
Yeah. Right. That's just maybe like that. Effectively, so if I go from magwell to magwell, let's go that way around. You can see that the buttstock of this comes back to the rear of the actual receiver on the SLR.
Yeah.
And then it has a shorter muzzle brake on it as well. So it's considerably shorter rifle for the same length of barrel, which is very, very good for, when you're fighting in urban environments, or if you are, say, part of a massively mechanized military and most of your time is spent in the back of a armored vehicle traversing the plains of Europe, which coincidentally was what the British Army was set up to do post World War II, because everyone knew it was those damn Ruskies that would be fighting next.
Yeah, we're sitting right in the centre in the folder gap, trying to stop the Ruskies for as long as possible.
Yep.
Whether the Ruskies were ever going to attack is a whole other question. Completely different discussion. We may have that again at some point. Basically, it was complete nonsense. The Russians were only going to attack if NATO attacked, and NATO was only going to attack if the Russians attacked. But hey, everyone needs a bogeyman, don't they? So that's kind of what happened.
Yeah.
So
it was mad.
Go ahead, Ben.
It was mad. It was the same sort of insurance policy of, well, we're ready to fight you if you're going to fight us, but we won't fight you unless you fight us, sort of situation.
Yeah, but we decided we wanted a new weapon. The Americans hadn't stuck to the plan. We decided we were going to go off and do our own thing anyway. In that case, and there were we had all sorts of crazy calibers being touted, like 4.7 and even 3.8 or something, which was going to be absolutely tiny. The Americans were doing all the Spew project and Salvo project with multiple projectiles and flechettes and shotgun shells with 20 flechettes in and all that nonsense, which not nonsense, never really worked.
No,
and there was
a foul version of that as well. They made a double-barreled foul. So think of, was it the DT4?
Yeah.
They made
so the DT4 isn't complete nonsense then?
No, they made that work with a foul. They had a double-barreled foul that had 2 mags and fired 2 rounds at the same time. And then they had one that was the same thing but with double-loaded rounds, so it fired 4 rounds, which is like, oh well, we're just chucking loads of stuff down. It'll probably hit.
Well, the theory was, so it's actually, and it's kind of part of this development. So we'll talk about it a little bit right now. The theory was effectively that it was actually quite hard to shoot people.
Yes.
So number one, people generally don't want to shoot other people. It's kind of not really in people's nature, and that takes quite a lot of training and mental training to overcome. Two, the kind of engagement people getting into, it's all about very short, and this is very relevant to airsofters. It's actually quite hard to shoot people, not because the guns aren't necessarily inaccurate, but because you're shooting at a fleeting target for a very short amount of time. And it's quite hard to hit those people with just one shot. Airsofters get around it by going full auto, blazing like mad, and trying to get as many BBs in the air as possible. And that's pretty much what these armies were also thinking about, is how do they get as many projectiles into the air as quickly as possible in order to make a hit on a real fleeting target.
Yes. Sorry, I'm just trying to find it, because I know one of the prototypes, so I think it was the XL60, appeared in one of the Britain's kind of crappy, well, not crappy, cop dramas of the time. Was it The Specialists or something like that? Yeah, no, just a random tidbit of information there that I remember seeing at some point.
Let me just pull up that photo we had on earlier. If I can find it. So okay, so we had a load of prototype, load of different. So we were looking at. Yes, Rob. People in real life, people do take their hits. So yes, we had a load of prototype different ammunition types. Let's just bang this picture back up again. A lot of it was about, if you have a really, again, bullets that go really fast make it easier to hit people because they shoot really flat, and you're limiting them, you're maximising the amount of time you have in order to hit the target. So that tends to help. So in the middle, you've got you say it was this is the 60 in the middle, Ben. This is one of the early prototypes.
Yes, XL60 or the XL70. Hang on, I will. As soon as the picture pops up on the live stream. I think that's a 70.
Okay, so let's talk about. Okay, so ball pups, confined spaces, APCs, helicopters, everything else. Super cool for manoeuvring and moving around and moving inside confined spaces. In airsoft, they don't make as much sense because you really don't need a very long barrel. But there you go. Still,
I'll come on to that in a bit when we get further down the line on L85s. But yeah, that was the idea of bullpups, was long barrels, you still got the accuracy, but shorter length so you can manoeuvre around. In fact, the L85 platform is the same length as an M4 with its stock collapsed, I believe. So for that kind of reference...
And you're looking at a 20-odd inch barrel. Okay, so let's go right back to the start of development of the SA-80 family, because it was a family of weapons that they wanted to produce.
Yes, so the idea was that they'd have not only just one service rifle for everyone, they would then have one family of weapons that have mostly interchangeable parts to serve all the roles, apart from, I think, sniper. So you had what was the L85, which was the they call it the IW, or the service weapon, the individual weapon. And then there was the L86, which I would normally be able to show you, but is currently not here. But think pretty much same rifle, apart from had a grip on the back, a flip-up shoulder rest, and slightly different handguard, and a longer barrel with outriggers and a bipod.
Just going to drop one on screen now for people to see. Yep. So it's basically what you're holding in your hands, plus a big outrigger with a bipod on it.
I have the outrigger and bipod.
Okay.
There is the outrigger and bipod assembly. So my L86 is currently being used as a design guide for the ICS EK3 rail that I'm working on. But yeah, that's the sort of length you're looking at for the support weapon. God, it almost looks like an LSW like that.
I'm just covering my face up with a L86 at the minute. So yeah, there was a plan to replace the GPMG and the L4, which was the 7.62 Bren in service. They also wanted to replace the Sterling with a little short one.
So no, the Sterling. Sorry, too many rifles around the place and too many slings. The Sterling, which I have here, with its stock extended, was actually longer than the L85. So,
wow.
Or pretty much dead on the same length. Maybe a little bit shorter.
But okay,
But,
yeah, that's mainly the flash.
So the
idea.
IW could replace the Sterling just straight up.
Straight up, right? Okay.
So the idea was, yes, this would be the replacement for the SLR and the Sterling together into one package. And they took the full-size battle rifle cartridge and the little ditty 9mm pistol cartridge and mashed them together and gave us 5.56, which, America tells us is a brand new idea when they did it, but Russia had been using 7.62R, which for scale, there's it next to 7.62 NATO. For donkeys.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, Russia did the right thing, went for that intermediate cartridge. And do you know one of the big reasons for going for the intermediate cartridge, other than weight and felt recoil?
Tell us.
The idea was if you're fighting a modern army and you hit one soldier with a 7.62 round, they're most likely dead. So that's one soldier out of the equation. If you hit a soldier with a 5.56 round, they're most likely wounded. And suddenly you're taking 3 or 4 guys out of the equation because they will stop to medic and look after that injured soldier. Obviously, this kind of fell down a bit when we went into Afghanistan, Taliban, and most of them were quite doped up on things like opiates. And you'd put a 5.56 round into someone, and they keep coming. And you
had
keep
a lot of
putting
problems
5.56
in Gothic Serpent with the green tip armor. So they developed a green tip armor penetration. Slight aside, guys. Armor penetration round for dealing with Russian body armor, and then they were shooting it at unarmored targets and poking holes in them, and they're all done on CAT, so that really didn't help very much.
Yeah. Which is why we started adopting 7.62 weapons back into service quite a lot in Afghanistan, with things like the SR-25 or what was the British Army
sharpshooter,
the
L129. Gaz will probably tell us in a minute in the comments. I'm sure he can remember. Anyway, so we decided to adopt a bullpup in an intermediate cartridge. We hadn't quite decided on the calibre of the intermediate cartridge just yet. Let's go into kind of the origins and history of this program. You know, you've met some of the engineers on it. I've read quite a lot about it. What weapon was it based on? I think Royal Ordnance would have you believe that they invented it from scratch. This is a good story.
It was based on another rifle made by none other than Eugene Stoner, the man who invented the AR-10 and the AR-15, which was then the M16. And he went, you know what, actually, the M16 is quite a hard rifle to make. It's got all these fine machine parts. How would we mass produce a rifle in case of, World War III? And they made something called the AR-180 or AR-18, which was a stamped steel and rod assembly guide, short stroke piston short stroke piston cycling rifle, and it was very cheap and easy to do. And then lo and behold, a certain company over in the UK managed to get the license to make them over here, which was Sterling Armament, the makers of the Sterling submachine gun, and effectively it was a stamped steel body. I haven't seen a stamped steel body rifle anywhere recently. And then the tolerance parts were the barrel and the bolt and bolt face assembly and 2 guide rods, which the bolt ran on. So your body could be easily manufactured, and then you only needed the fine machining for a very small fraction of the parts in the rifle. And obviously, being kind of 60s and 70s Britain, still paying off war debts and shrinking Commonwealth and shrinking economy, we went, hang on, that'd be quite good if we could have a cheap made rifle, but we want it in a bullpup. So Royal Armaments went away and invented this new rifle, and then Sterling went, hang on a damn minute, and effectively Royal Armaments, what they did was bought an AR-180 from Sterling and basically bullpupped it. So Sterling, to try and prove the point, bullpupped their own Sterling AR-180, and then the government went, yeah, so what, I don't care.
I think it was even worse than that. They were at Farnborough one year.
Yeah.
So this is Royal Ordnance, and the desk just down the hall was Sterling, and they were Royal Ordnance were showing off their new rifle in prototype form, and everyone's like, ooh, and Sterling were like, I recognise some of those parts. Went down, I think you're using our bolt and our bolt carrier, and they were like, no, you're not. broke the weapon open, pulled it out. Yeah, it's got Sterling trademark. It's got Sterling roll marks on it.
Yep. Yeah, it sounds about right. But yeah, that was the design. They went, okay, well, we'll take an AR-180 and bullpup it, and that was it.
So then effectively, they spent 10 years making it worse.
Yeah, so 20 years of back and forth between various engineers, and I think the design team on the what became the SA-80 program, I think, changed entirely about 3 times over.
Jesus,
so not only were the people who finished the project not there when it started, the people they learnt or picked the project up from weren't there when it started, and none of them had designed a gun before.
Yeah,
that was.
And engineers being engineers, everyone thinks you can do it better than the last guy.
Well, as an engineer, you can.
And they, they couldn't decide on the fire controls. Yeah. My dog shaking his.
So yeah, they switched a lot of the times between having safety, much like a AR-15, having safety under your thumb on your trigger group, to having it at the back, whether or not it should be a push bolt through. So they kind of settled on the middle of both. So it's electro safety on the back and then a bolt on the front for the actual safety. So bolt safety on the front and then toggle switch on the back to select between.
So do you want to? Can you just show the guys and girls the fire control?
So you have safe and fire under your trigger hand. So manual of arms to this rifle is you always have your trigger hand on the trigger. But there you go. So that's in safe, and your fire falls straight under your trigger finger.
Okay.
So you can take it off and go straight to it. And then everything else, so like charging the rifle, you do with your offhand. So you come over the top, charge it, do all that stuff, and then your selector switch is back here. Not only is that very easy to do in terms of an engineering point, because all of your actual trigger parts are back here. Their reasoning for it is it's a very conscious decision to come off of the rifle and come back here to select the automatic position.
Yeah.
Because kind of inverse to airsoft, the only time you're meant to use auto on one of these is if you're clearing a room. Whereas in airsoft, it's like, you just use auto everywhere, and then when you're in close, switch to semi, which is really weird to think about it, but that's how it is. Yeah. And there we can talk about the short stroke gas piston design. This one has the mock parts in, so that cycles back, hits the bolt, charges it, and that's obviously your actual gas piston there.
Yeah.
So that was the kind of layout they went for, but there were designs where it was all up here under your thumb and stuff. Obviously, one of the big things to mention with it being a bullpup, especially this design with the external charging handle attached to the bolt, is your face is quite close to it, and if you're shooting it southpaw, you're just going to get your teeth removed.
So there are no left-handed shooters in the British Army?
No, absolutely not, unless your name is Prince Andrew and you got a custom left-handed version of this made for you. Yes. So they did actually design this to be with left-handed versions in, but obviously that was more expensive to have 2 sets of tooling, so that never happened. Other than, I think, one of the princes got given one for service.
Well, I think one of the justifications I heard was that left-handed shooters, so you could obviously shoot an L1A1 or an SLR left-handed. One of the justifications for not doing a left-handed one is that left-handed shooters could shoot a right-handed L85 more accurately than they could do an L1A1 anyway. So they were just like, well, it's just somewhat twisted logic, because they would have shot a left-handed L85 even more accurately. But the logic, you can see the procurement logic going on there.
Yes. Yeah, it's an interesting one, and also I think part of it is to do with obviously the whole point of this was this rifle was meant to be used in a big whole squad formation, and you'd be stacked up, and it wasn't designed for room clearing and stuff really like it is now.
No, it's designed for shooting Ruskies on the folded gap.
Exactly.
And we'll come back to that, because that's quite an important point. It was designed for a Western European environment, sitting statically in a trench, and then shooting single shot Russians 300 meters away as they come over a hill. That's what it's for, or as they deploy 200 meters away from their BMPs. Yeah, and that's what the rifle's for.
Coming back to it, this was one of the very futuristic things about it, other than it being bullpup, is the fact that it was issued with an optic to pretty much everyone. The only time it wasn't issued with optics was for jungle combat, and then you'd have the iron sights on.
So I've just put a sight picture image up for the stream, as you'll see in a minute.
Yeah. Obviously, is this looking down the sight?
Yeah, down the scope. Yeah, so through the scope.
So it's obviously not as fancy dancy as some other optics were. In fact, the suit is exactly the same. Both of them are, as FPS Russia called it, doggy dick style. Yeah. It is just a pillar, and then you put your target on the top of the pillar. And again, all of your range controls are done externally. So if I just whack this sight off quickly. So you have, is the camera going to focus? Yes, but there's probably not enough light. You have a big adjustment disc here with range marks on it, and that's what you do. You zero it at 300 meters, and then you just go out further. You turn it to the number of 100 meters you need to shoot at.
Or do you just leave it?
Or you just leave it and kind of hold over.
James C says there was indeed an SA8 prototype used in the professionals.
There we go. The professionals.
Dan says also had an awful magazine catch, which drops a magazine out at the most inconvenient moment. We'll go into that in a minute, Dan, with the
Much
A2s.
like the very early M16.
Yeah, had the same problem.
No fencing, effectively. And it was said by, I think Ian says it on his things, that it was very much a case of they did most things almost right, but it's those things that someone who's designed rifles before would know that you actually just need to make a couple of these little tweaks. And they did. We'll get onto it when we talk about.
So let's do the trials, because that's another, and that's another den of iniquity. It's almost like the Sunderland. Yeah. So in trials. So my understanding is that in trials were not good. It was not working, and they had acceptance standards for failures to fire and stoppages and everything else. And in order, and we'll go into why they pushed this through in a minute. But in order to push the weapon through its trials, they ended up redefining what a stoppage was.
Yeah. So I think they redefined what a failure was.
Yeah.
As to anything a soldier couldn't fix in the field, including splitting firing pins and breaking
firing pins, and
So all squaddies were issued with a spare firing pin. And again, it's because they made the pin out of the wrong type of material. And lo and behold, in the A2, H&K came in and changed the material, and suddenly it worked fine.
Yeah.
Which boggles my mind how they got the firing pin wrong, seeing as they just took the bolt out of a working AR-180.
That's what I said. They made it worse over. Made it worse over 10 years. It's quite an incredible. They're trying to save money. I assume they thinned all the wall sections. They tried to use cheaper materials. They tried to use have a simpler heat treat. Some of these high end firearm steels are expensive.
And it was the same thing with the Antrim and the frigates, the light frigates that went to Falklands. They cheaped out and built the superstructures on those out of aluminium, which was all well and good, and it was nice and light and went fast. But in any form of combat where they got hit, suddenly that aluminium burns.
Yeah, metal burns.
Fast. Yeah. And that's what happened to like the Antrim and stuff. Like they just burnt out wrecks. If it had been made out of steel, that ship would probably have survived that hit and that bomb.
Yeah, so that's military procurement. Okay, so let's go. Why was this so? Why did this weapon get rammed through its trials?
Well, that's actually a good question.
So it's about order books at Royal Ordnance.
Oh yeah, because they were gonna lay off a load of people. They were shutting back.
Well, they were going to sell Royal Ordnance. So the Conservatives were going to sell Royal Ordnance into a private company. Actually, went to British Aerospace and a few other people. But in order to, obviously, when you're buying a company, you want it to be a going concern with a full order book. So in order to sell Royal Ordnance to a private buyer, there needed to be an order book. And what was on the order book? The SA-80 family of weapons. So it just had to go through.
Yes, and so they changed the stuff and. It was like the LSW only had to fire something like 300 shots in 24 hours. It's something stupid like that. Because they're like, it's for light support, very light support.
Well, that was based on the fact that what would probably happen is in the folder, going back to the folder gap, and we talked about this. So in the folder gap, you've got your basic load, probably one resupply. The Ruskies are coming at you. You fire off your basic load, get a resupply, and then you're overrun. So it doesn't need far more than 300 rounds in a 24-hour period because you'll be dead.
Well, it's like the NBC suits. They're like, oh yeah, the Russians NBC stuff lasts 48 hours, so ours is going to last 52 hours. So we've got that 4 hours where they're all dead to kind of go through and just.
Well, the Russians,
say, we won.
The Russians didn't expect anyone to survive. It was just to keep people in the fight. Different philosophy. So again, the weapon was never really spec'd. So the A1 effectively it was then around 1985 the individual weapon came into service along with the L86. People were not happy.
Oh, let's talk about the cadet rifle as well.
And also there was a cadet rifle. I'm just going to chuck one of those on screen.
God,
as well.
That was an awful rifle.
So this is the L90. This is the L98 cadet rifle.
A1, yeah, the one where they're like, oh, we can't give cadets semi-automatic rifles, and they'll be too weak to cock it normally. So they put some goofy, stupid cocking mechanism on it.
Yeah.
And then just to make it worse, like the whole manual of arms for the cadet rifle was completely different to the manual of arms for the actual rifle.
And actually, if you're teaching any physical skill, you need to do first principles. Need to be correct from the start. So you don't ever relearn things.
So that's the A1 version, and you can see they don't have the same flash hider on, and they've got this stupid cocking mechanism. If you look kind of above the shooter's hand, it's kind of a cocking bolt up here. And so instead of coming over and doing your manual of arms like pop back, lock, this one doesn't lock. I got sold a dud. Cocking back and lock. It was you take your shooting hand off and rack the bolt like a straight pull rifle.
Which is the whole thing. Manual of arms for the L85 was designed. You never take your shooting hand off the weapon.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And then it also added into issues of a lot of people would rack it back and then not release it like that, but would kind of let it go forwards and release, and then it didn't have enough spring pressure to load the round and stuff. So that was a really, really, really hated cadet rifle. But they got the A2 cadet rifle right. Anyway.
Okay, so A1, A1's adopted. Everyone's used to this great big. Ironically, what they managed to make a weapon which weighed more than the outgoing weapon, which was really quite impressive for an intermediate caliber weapon, which is shorter. They managed to make it weigh more than the L1.
Well, yeah, a lot of that was the SUSAT. The SUSAT is a heavy old beast.
But it's still people like. I'm sure squaddies were delighted that their big heavy gun was replaced by a short, very heavy gun.
Yeah. Although a lot of the weight is in the back, and it actually makes it quite a controllable and pointable gun like that. That's one of the reasons I absolutely love using L85s for airsoft.
Okay.
That little aside. They introduced the L85A1, and very quickly there were issues found with it. Although some squaddies, not naming any names, Mark and Gadge, will say that they actually quite enjoyed the A1 and didn't actually have that many problems with it. But I know a lot of armourers did very quick modifications, like adding in a very dodgily welded fence around the magazine release cap.
They just run a weld around it, do they?
Yeah, or they just kind of bent a bit of steel and welded it on, which, funnily enough, is what H&K did. But effectively, that was the problem, because you're running with this rifle and it was rubbing against your webbing, and then all of a sudden you don't have a mag in the rifle.
Yeah, just like the early M16s we spoke about.
Yeah, but the M16s were slightly better because wasn't the mag release on
the other side?
Yeah, your offboard side as opposed to the one inbound
in contact with all your gear as you're patrolling along. So the first big show for the L85 was Gulf War 1.
Yep.
It was not good.
No, and that was kind of a lot of British military equipment was like that, because it was Charlie 1 as well, which had issues in Gulf War 1. And both of them suffered the same problem. Dust got into the rifle and caused everything to cack up and jam and not feed properly. The other thing that we haven't mentioned yet is the mags for them were made by Radway Green, and they were made of 0.5 mil alloy, or is it sheet steel? 0.5 mil sheet steel. And they were originally contracted to make one-use mag. So it was
the classic disposable magazine.
Yeah, disposable magazine.
Which is a concurrent theme through military development and procurement.
Yeah,
in the 20th century.
Yeah, and then the government was like, "Oh shit, no, those are expensive. We'll keep those."
Apparently, you could cause a stoppage with the original Rebel Green magazines. If you held them here, that was enough to stop the follower going up.
Yep, absolutely. And they were just a pile of crap, to be honest. and that was a big problem. So a lot of the squaddies tried to desperately, before they went on deployment, buy as many bloody Colt mags as they could.
It's not good, is it?
Yeah.
So they went into the Gulf War. So they had loads of problems with. Obviously, I think a lot of weapon systems had problems with sand. The best ones were the ARs because they could close them all up. If you just show your L85, it's got some fucking big holes in it, which really doesn't help. It's like you're trying to keep your weapon clean and with no sand in it, and there's massive holes everywhere. That's really not.
I don't know if you can find a photo of it, but a lot of photos coming up like Afghan and stuff. You'll see they've got like green sniper style tape, fabric tape over these holes because really they say these are heat holes, but they're really kind of here for just lightening of the steel. So you just put a couple of bits of tape over it, and that fixes that issue quite a lot.
Handguards melted because these are wrong polymers.
They used the wrong polymers, so the polymers on this was crap. And in fact, I've actually got my G&G A2 handguard on this A1 because, funnily enough, the Army Armament A1, in true fashion, is crap plastic. And same with this cheek. The rubber butt pad's not bad though. But yeah, the polymers were crap. They all broke. Trying to think what else. The triggers in coming the other side of things in cold climates. So I think this is actually an A2 trigger on here, but they didn't have what they called an icebreaker style, and you could get tons of snow build up in behind your trigger, and you wouldn't be able to fire your weapon. So they added the icebreaker style trigger, and that kind of fixed that. So I think originally what happened with the A1s was the first factory making them basically started production, and it wasn't CNC controlled, it was all kind of manual control building them. And then as they started the production, I basically told, oh yeah, you're doing this production run, and then you're shutting down.
Yeah, start laying people off. Yeah, they built some in Nottingham near us.
Yeah.
Actually quite near to where I am now. The site's now long gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, they told all those guys they were being laid off at the time they were producing them. So
who gives a shit, basically? Yeah. And yeah, that's why you got kind of crappy production. And then they moved it to I can't remember what factory they moved to. But then that was all CNC controlled, and funnily enough, production quality went up and the rifle quality went up, but it still had issues. And I think one of the big issues that they had in Gulf War that really exacerbated the situation, which wasn't actually an L85 fault, was a lot of the ammo being supplied was American made, and it didn't actually meet NATO spec.
Yep.
So it was underpowered, so the guns weren't cycling properly because these actually need quite a bit of oomph to cycle. And that just kind of exacerbated the situation. But yeah, the A1 was not the best rifle, as much as Mark will be screaming in the comments now. Oh yeah, here you go. You just had to keep them really well lubed and cleaned.
Yeah, which is quite hard in a desert.
Yeah, and when you're actually actively fighting.
Okay, so we're getting on for time, but let's get on to the A2. So there was quite a public scandal which the government pretended didn't actually exist for a long time. No, the rifles are fine. The rifle's fine. There was a public inquiry in the end into the issues. Stuff came out, and the Germans, who are actually owned by British Aerospace at the time, were brought on board to fix it to make the L85A2. And they did, but again, Ian Forgot Weapons has got a very detailed video on the exact changes that were made to the rifle to make it work. But fundamentally, you touched on it earlier, fundamentally they got weapons engineers to just make the tiny little changes which they needed to do in the first place, and use the right materials. Mark's just said, I didn't say it was easy to keep them working, I just said it could be done.
Yeah.
And just
Ben makes an interesting point about how the A1 was very similar to the M16 in Vietnam. It was basically government cock-ups that led to it being crap. So the government cheaped out with the M16 and didn't issue cleaning kits because they were told it was self-cleaning.
Partly Carlton Eugene himself made that problems. Yeah, it was fundamentally the A1, the M16 in Vietnam was not ready.
No, it wasn't.
It needed another 5 years of trials and testing. And
really, the A1 needed a weapons engineer looking at it.
And if you look at most weapons, go through a period of difficulty. Most of them get away with it. It only really comes when they go into war at a fairly early stage that problems arise. So let's, if you can just briefly touch on, if you can remember what the Germans did to the L85, apart from everything.
Well, apart from everything, they didn't do that much. They changed out the furniture, the cocking handle, the bolt face, the breech. They also reinforced the receiver. They changed the way the mag catch was covered. Weirdly, the selector switch was fine. I think that was about it. So other than those minor non-essential components, they didn't really change all that. Oh, and the trigger. They changed the trigger.
And as Gaz says, they opened up some of the tolerances as well, just to stop some binding. But most of the stuff that goes back and forward in the gun was changed.
Yes, absolutely. So that was, so speaking of the tolerances, the breech into the barrel, they opened up the holes to make extraction easier. Obviously, the charging handle was changed because part of the issues they were having were feeding issues, because this style of charging handle with the kind of knurled notch, very easy to machine because you can do it on a lathe, but sometimes it would catch the case and bounce it back in, which is not where empty cases should be going. They should be going that way, not that way.
That's right.
So instead, they changed it to this lovely kind of teardrop-shaped charging handle there, which Squaddy thought was lovely, a nice little smooth handle for me to hold. But no, it's actually designed as a case deflector to flip cases away. Yeah,
you can see it. Some of Ian's stuff on Forgotten Weapons. He's got some high speed of cases being gathered up and thrown away. And it's part of what Heck and Koch did. Is they did a load of high speed filming under different conditions and just saw what was going on and looked at it. And by all accounts, it's a bit heavy. So the A2, it's a bit heavy, but fundamentally as a weapon, it's accurate. People like it.
Yeah.
It's now that's been moving on to the A3, but the A2 was fundamentally a very good rifle, and reliable. What do people really want when they're at war? They want a weapon that goes bang and can hit people.
So I remember being told by several people that they basically took an M16, they took an L85A2, and they took an AK and buried them in Afghan for like 6 months, just in a base under the sand, and then dug them out. And they basically poured water on all of them, and apparently the L85 and the AK functioned and the M16 didn't. But that's an interesting one, because the M16 is a very well sealed system to me, because you close the dust cover, you've not got exposed moving parts like the L85. So L85, you've still got your gas piston moving parts that are exposed, whereas the M16 it's a tap pipe all the way into your receiver. So who knows? But that's what they're saying. Yeah, and in fact they put it through trials, and I think of all the NATO service rifles, the L85 actually came out top between mean times between failures of the AT. And obviously the design, the short stroke gas piston design that used in this is now used in quite a lot of modern day battle rifle, day service rifles.
Pretty much all of them use the AR-18, AR-180 gas system now.
Yeah, apart from the M4 M16 family.
Yeah, which is just another it's another Stoner rotating bolt design. So this is an HK. This is a HK enhanced reliability magazine. So this is the one that they also looked at the magazine. So this was steel, heavy, has an anti-tilt follower in it.
That didn't work.
But this is the one that they came up with, which when I came out with the A2, since been replaced by Magpul EPMs, as they're a lot lighter, which look a bit like that.
Apart from without the floor plate.
But yeah, so that was the A2. That was doing fine. Went into Afghan. Have you got your Daniel Defence front rail?
I do indeed. So yeah, the A2 didn't look like this. This is my A3 mock-up. The A2 back end looked very similar, with still with the dovetail rail. And in fact, if I was to hold this up again, the A1, the only real external difference from this side would be the charging handle, and the only real external difference from this side would be the fence around the mag release. Externally, they look pretty similar, other than the furniture on the A2 wasn't broken, unlike the A1's. And in fact, if you watch Ian's videos on the A1, it's got broken furniture on it, because they're that crap. Even the ones they kept in museums broke. but obviously going into Afghan and stuff, they wanted something a bit better in terms of being able to fit sights and like laser detonators and down grips, and they also wanted a different optic because the SUSAT was showing its age and was a bit heavy. So they got sent out a UOR, urgent operational requirement, and Daniel Defence responded with the DD rail. This is a genuine DD rail. I also have the laser light module 1 on here with this in the real one. This is a clone, but that's what they were fitted with. So again, that just replaced the polymer handguard, still mounted to the gas block, so it wasn't free float, but had a. Oh, this one's a bit stiff. That's probably why it got sold on. There you go. Has a opening gas parts cover, so you can get your working parts. Easy peasy, not too heavy, and that added quad rails to the front of the L85. And then the other thing they did was this is my mock-up of one, is again under UOR got Trijicon ACOG on a special cantilever mount with an RMR on top.
Yep.
Which allowed them to do kind of close combat aiming as well. Because if you look at the SUSAT, it's a fixed 4x magnification. And if you don't need the magnification, you have some very basic backup iron sights on there. Those aren't adjustable, and funnily enough, they don't align with the optic in this one. But hey ho. And so with those two additions, that was kind of Afghan spec A2, yep. And then later on they adopted the they call it the LDS, which is effectively an LCAN Spectre, but fixed to 4x magnification, and again with an RMR on top, a shield sight. So I think, Jesus, have you seen Mark's latest comment?
Yeah, it's amazing.
SUSAT is amazing.
Just ignore him.
Yeah,
we generally do.
I think he's stuck.
Okay, so the A2, we've now got onto the. So that's pretty much okay. Still a bit heavy. They couldn't really help that. Yeah, they made it heavier by putting more capability on, but that needed to happen. You know, in modern war fighting, you need torches and lasers and IR designators and all that kind of stuff.
And the other thing that H&K made was the AG. Well, I can't remember what the official designation for it was, but this is effectively the G36 grenade launcher, but for the L85, 40mm, noob tube style, point and blow up. And then there were various different sighting systems. So there was originally the kind of manual, fence post style, or like step ladder style, aim off and fire. Then there was also the red dot. Yeah, they also did. There are some where they had a. Not only did you have your main optic, but you then had a bloody EOTech offset on a laser designator system. So I think you point at the target, it laser range finds, and then offsets the angle of the sight, and then you aim off to fire to put the sight on there, which was just adding more weight onto the rifle, which is nuts to think how heavy this thing could have been. So I'm assuming the government just went, well, it's heavy enough already, so we'll just give it to the big guy, and then hopefully that'll be fine.
Oh, it won't be the big guy; it'd be the new guy, won't it?
Oh, it'd be the new guy. Yeah,
the new guy gets the heavy thing. That's the way it works. So just put a kind of Afghan spec L85A2 up on screen. This is kind of towards the end of the Afghan campaigns.
Yeah. And they did then start also, throwing some paint on them as well and trying to get them a bit more blended in from just big black.
Okay, so let's finish off with the L85A3.
Yes.
Something slightly close to your heart.
Yes, it is. Or what I put it there. It's the A3. Or at least this is my mock-up version of it. Not quite all right. I actually quite like it in the all black, but they've gone for 50 Shades of Tan with the real one, and so they've Cerakoted it to kind of like flat dark earth on the main receiver, and then the rail is, I think it's REL 8000 they're using for it. But, yeah, and then they've gone out with the dovetail. So originally the L85s had the 18mm dovetail, which was a NATO sighting standard at the time.
Here we go again.
Gone to Picatinny.
Yeah.
Because America went, I don't like that system, I'm going to make my own. They made Picatinny, and then suddenly everyone had to use Picatinny. And then because they kind of don't care about standardization anymore, H&K, who did the A3 mod again, put H-key onto the side of the rails, so you get nice smooth sides that you can then mount to.
Okay, so one of the biggest differences with the A3s, it's free floated barrel.
So this one is free floated. So if I do that, you can see the kind of plasticky handguard that I've got on here wobbles about from the barrel, but the barrel is not touched by the handguard. And in fact, the way it all works is the handguard is mounted to a block which is mounted to the front of the receiver as opposed to the barrel. So all of the old handguards used to mount through the gas block and through that hole there. That hole. Hopefully that. There you go. You can probably see it. And so obviously, as you kind of put force on your handguard originally, it would change your point of impact.
This happens in airsoft a lot.
It does.
People think their rifle is inaccurate or they can't hit the guy. Airsoft guns generally are not that well made. Barrels and handguards will bend like anything. If you rest it on a surface, even holding it, even if you hold your rifle in front of you, you can bend them.
So when I play, I usually actually hold it like this, because then you've got no force out on that barrel, so hopefully it stays relatively straight. But yes, as much as it's bad military doctrine to hold your mag well as opposed to your handguard, it's actually pretty good for airsoft because you're not applying that torquing pressure on your barrels.
Yeah, I mean, so that's HK came up with their proprietary HK key system rather than using M-lock, as Gaz has pointed out, like the rest of the world is going to, which is probably end up being a really bad idea. But that's HK tying us into their procurement system and their special rails for the next 15 years. The swines.
And unlike M-lock and Keymod, it is not a freely accessible design.
No, so we have to buy stuff from them.
Yes,
the Germans again.
From the Germans, but then again, all you ever do is buy HK to Picatinny and then snap your accessory onto the Picatinny rail.
But by all accounts, it's been quite a success. I think there's a few other changes that have been made, but not nothing significant. So, are you aware of any other changes that have been made with the A3?
So so as with any rifle as it ages, they start wearing out internally. So they've done a couple of they call them C-welds to kind of bring everything back into line. So what you used to get with particularly very old and shagged out rifles is they call it TMH wobble, which is so in American doctrine it's the upper and lower receiver. In British doctrine it is I can't remember what the upper receiver is called, but the lower part is called the TMH or trigger mechanism housing, and that used to wobble until you could twist and torque your rifle. So they kind of retightened that up. And any other changes they made? There was issues with the original sight rails. In fact, if I get my sight off again, the way the original sight rail was held onto the rifle was with a couple of spot welds, and that was it. So as you look around on the top of it, you've got the 3 holes there.
Yeah.
Those were spot welded in those holes to attach the rail. And what they were noticing towards the kind of end of the L85A2 was that you could start to see daylight between your dovetail rail and your receiver, which is obviously not what you want, because that's where your optic goes, and that needs to be fixed and firm so you can get your zero back every time you take your sight on and off, which is why they then moved over to the full-length Picatinny and they went for a new type of mounting system, which should be a lot stronger. But yeah, in terms of actual firing mechanism, I was lucky enough to be able to speak with the H&K. I wouldn't say they're engineers; it's probably their sales rep. But in terms of the actual mechanism behind it, they haven't changed anything else. Anything out. They may have resurfaced parts and put new parts in, but still the same design. And that was about it, really.
I reckon it's now seriously accurate. They can push it out to 600 meters.
Oh yeah. So I mean, we're not talking about support weapons, but basically they've got rid of the light support weapon completely. They don't have the SAW anymore. They've got the L86 is now pretty much died of death. So it was originally replaced, and it kind of got pushed back to being a pseudo-designated marksman rifle, of which it was actually pretty good at. Long barrel, bipod, good for one shot. Part of the going back to the 86, part of the reason it has the outrigger is because the barrel wobbled too much in full auto, so they put this big outrigger on there to hold it hold it steady enough. So that's why the doctrine was 3-round bursts, because any more than that, the barrel would be all over the place.
Oh, Jesus.
Giant spread. But yeah, in the single shot roll, it was actually pretty good. But yeah, they got rid of that, and now the doctrine is you've got your GPMG for your really long range suppressive fire.
So that's the 7.62 NATO, the general,
Yeah, general purpose machine gun, the FN mag, the Gimpy,
which we'll go into probably in another episode.
Yeah,
we'll do some more ancillary weapons.
It's basically the NATO equivalent of the M60, but better.
Could you chuck a picture of the A3 up? Because every time I switch window, my headset cuts out, so I don't really want to do that. Yeah, but basically, so now it's free floated and a bit more accurate. They've replaced the saw, so the I forget the designation, but we were effectively using a Minimi in 5.56. That's gone. The LSWs have gone, and they've brought back in the GPMG 7.62 NATO machine gun, the FN mag into section level again now, which I'm sure everyone but the new guy that has to carry it is very happy about.
And yeah, the reason they've got rid of the light support weapons is because they've decided that you can actually get effective fire out to like 600 or 800 meters with the A3s, and it'd be much better to have most of the squad carrying those and being able to, instead of suppressing an area, for instance, the side of a building, they could all put rounds through the same bloody window in the building.
Yeah,
and if you've got a 10-man squad and 8 of them are carrying these rifles and 2 of them are carrying Gimpies, then suddenly you've got 8 rounds each.
And someone's got a sharpshooter as well.
Yeah, so you've got 8 accurate rounds coming through that window. So this photo I've got up at the moment is actually the prototype, the very first A3, and the issued ones are slightly different. So if you look at the handguard, there are big holes at the top, which they may have accidentally burnt some squaddies' fingers with.
Oh, right. So that's where all the hot gas comes out from the short stroke and burnt some fingers.
They effectively gripped through it and put their fingers through that hole and were basically resting against the piston there, which is obviously not the best. So they've changed that now to the design I've got here, which is the kind of double stacked holes, so you can't actually get your fingers in there.
Yep.
Chilled it off a bit more. Any other design changes? No, I don't think they have. The other thing they were going to do was have if we can find it somewhere. There we go. They were originally going to issue it with a mounted UGL, but now they've decided that it's easier to do a separately carried UGL. So you have a dedicated grenade launcher as opposed to a grenade rifle.
You can see as well, and that means he's got some sort of, has he got thermal or a night sight in front of his primary optic.
So the idea there is because it's now a monolithic rail, you can keep your day sight on all the time and then just put an image intensifier in front of it.
Yep.
And then the other little bit of tidbit that I can tell you from this is this used to be an LSW, because if you look, you've got this mount here, and then you've got this hole up here, which I am pretty sure is where the outriggers used to attach to on the LSW, and they've had to bore that out to make the A3. Which is, just a little bit of tidbit. But yeah, so as opposed to the down your defence rail where you could still, hang on, I'll switch back to my full screen, where you could open your gas compartment and see into your parts, the A3 design is a tooled removal of the rail to be able to then work on the parts. But it is one tool, which is take out this rear pin, and it's much like kind of the 416 style of delta ring that amounts to.
Okay.
Same thing, just slides off, pull the screw out, slides off, and then you got access to your gas parts. Or for as airsoft as your battery space, because there are no A3s available for airsoft.
Yep. So you, Angry Gun, make one.
Yep.
You're in the process of developing one as well.
Yeah, although that one might be delayed now because of COVID-19, unfortunately. Maybe September.
Okay.
Now, but yeah, so that's what the A3 is, and that's pretty much the most up-to-date service rifle we've got. In fact, it's so up-to-date; it's still being rolled out.
And they're not going to convert the whole fleet either. They don't.
No,
we don't really need to. They've got like 200,000 L85A2s, And we don't have two. We only got about 10 squaddies anyway, so they really don't need the whole lot being done.
Yeah. Speaking of numbers of squaddies, I was telling you yesterday about operation called Operation Lionheart, which was a big test back in '84, so just before the A1 got rolled in, and it was effectively, if Russia were to invade Europe, how quickly could we respond as Britain to this thing? And it involved something like 131,000 troops. And this was just for one practice exercise, and that couldn't have been our whole army at the time.
That's bigger than our entire army at the moment.
Yeah, and they had to use all the RAF transport planes plus hire out most of BA's fleet to ship these people over, add a crap ton of ferries, and they effectively just stormrolled across Europe up to Germany, and then the rest of NATO played the opposition, and it was like the first roll of Challengers versus like M1 Abrams and stuff. It was a very interesting thing, but that just shows you how much our army shrunk over the years. And in fact, I think even our RAF is smaller than RAF Germany used to be. Like back when the Berlin Wall fell, there were more aircraft and personnel in Germany from the RAF than we have personnel and aircraft today.
Well, we're out of the heavy armour business, really.
Oh yeah, we are. Very much so.
In terms of, certainly couldn't put an armoured division in the field anymore. That's long since gone. Could probably barely put a brigade. If we could even put a brigade in, I'd be quite impressed. Okay, so we're up to date with British service weapons. If you guys have enjoyed this, we'll probably come back and do the rest of the bits and bobs. Maybe a bit harder because we don't have a GPMG lying around, and but we'll certainly go into the small metal gun, and because it links into the rest of the story and why we've done this. So I'll just say goodbye to Ben now. Thank you very much, Ben. I'll have a chat with you in a minute once we're off stream, and just to say thanks. And we've just been visited by my dog Oscar. Oscar, look, Oscar, you're on stream, Oscar. Say hello to everybody. Oh yes, you're such a good boy.
Oh, he's a very good boy.
He is a good boy, isn't he? So thanks for coming, Ben. Really good to talk to you. Hang around. I'll talk to you when I've shut the stream down. Thanks for everyone for tuning in and watching. Thanks for your comments. I'll leave this up as a video on YouTube, so we can all chat on that as well. If you want us to talk about anything, just drop a comment in the YouTube video once it's a VOD, and we'll get around to covering that next time. Thanks for tuning in. Absolutely brilliant. It's just gone, other than a few technical issues with my headphones, which I'll sort out. Thanks very much for watching the stream and tuning in, and we'll keep you going in these times of absolutely no airsoft whatsoever with really, really nerdy gun stuff. See you all later. Goodbye.
Bye.